A very warm welcome to one and all. Thank you again for joining us today for the second interaction of the seminar series as part of the ICOMOS Training and Capacity Building Program, Settlement Study at Kudase Village in collaboration with SMEFS Brick School of Architecture, Pune. I am Ramya Gopalakrishnan and I will be the master of ceremony for today. We are extremely elated to have ICOMOS agree to collaborate with us in this approach to sensitize students to the values and significance of the tangible and intangible aspects of heritage and inculcate in them an understanding and a sense of appreciation of the same right from the college level. So I thank ICOMOS for that. And this collaboration is in the form of a comprehensive activity that aims to bring a holistic and contextual engagement with the local precincts, their biodiversity, the rich vernacular culture, and the built environment. The proposed activity is based on the settlement study titled Comprehensive Study of Heritage Settlement in the Western Ghats. The activity will involve participation from the second year students of SMEFS Brick School of Architecture, Pune, India, with the support of the West Zone National Scientific Committee on Historic Towns and Villages, Cultural Landscapes, Education and Training, and the Emerging Professionals Training Group. We are gathered here today to discuss and understand the context of study in detail through the insightful seminars by experts. This is a precursor to the fieldwork on site located at Kudase village near Tillari Conservation Reserve. The concluding stage of the study will include compilation of the documentation through a publication that will tie the entire activity into a comprehensive resource. The precursor activity is split into 3 days of rigorous lectures, online and offline, of which the first lecture was conducted on 29th. Mr. Raman Kulkarni and Girish Punjabi gave a very holistic insight into the significance of Western Ghats and the management challenges faced under the category of natural heritage. The second set of presentations today included 2 offline lectures in the morning, and now we are going to have 2 online lectures by architect Suryanarayana Murthy and architect Onkar Khebutkar. Before we delve into these perceptive lectures, I request architect Niyati Jigyasu to introduce NSCHTV to the audience. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and good evening to all of you. So I would just take a few minutes of your time to talk about ICOMOS as an organization and NSC that I represent and the way forward that we are going to go towards. So ICOMOS, which is the International Council of Monuments and Sites, is a non-governmental international organization with members from all over the world that work for conservation and protection of cultural heritage places. It promotes the application of theory, methodology, and scientific techniques to the conservation of architectural and archaeological heritage. The historic cities, towns, and villages is one of the many scientific committees of ICOMOS. And we at ICOMOS India, especially, because we also talk about the Indian perspective, where we actually look at historic settlements, which are towns, villages, areas, cities, as dynamic entities that manifest overlay of various periods of changing socio-cultural and political economic forces. Individually or as part of larger settlements, these places are generally the hub of activities and lived in places with a very distinct identity of their own. The characteristic way of life, communities, and the lifestyle associations with events, rituals, and practices, visual culture and townscape elements, sense of place, all contribute to the significance of these settlements. So basically, just for the sake of the students, I'm just trying to put it in this perspective, mainly because we have gone ahead from, looking at heritage as basically monuments to coming up with, this entire as a way of life. So NSC STV, HCTV, basically firmly believes that historic areas, whether a city, town, or village, it can't be actually frozen in time. So new interventions are definitely going to happen. They are also very necessary because of the various aspirations of various people, which can be residents, visitors, tourists in case of many cities. So, and these represent the aspirations of the, it's a diverse set of stakeholders that we are looking at, and it will continue to happen. And it will be an integral part of it where people are going to live, work, conduct their daily lives. So in order to retain the significance of the historic areas, whether it is towns or villages also, and to integrate these areas in a holistic context, it's important to enable approaches towards integration of heritage conservation in the contemporary development context, and explore the urban and regional planning instruments to enable the same. For as an NSC that we are looking at, National Scientific NSC of Historic Cities, Towns and Villages, we are a group of approximately 50 individuals whose background comes from planning to architecture to law also. And we have been working in the area of historic settlements in the terms of research, as project work, as academics, as ICOMOS India also. Our basically aim is to work in building research, in capacity building and training, as we have been doing right now, raising our voice for any heritage which we think is in danger because of various reasons, which can be political to even local issues, and also give us suggestions or advice also to government or other bodies. Like just for example, we recently sent out a report from ICOMOS India, which put in suggestions for to the Delhi Development Authority, which had actually put out the master plan for Delhi for 2050. So we also work in this direction where we can actually put out suggestions from our side of considering that we have so many experts who come together in this field. And as far as this exercise is concerned, I think we as human beings, we have always been living with nature. We have learned to appreciate them. We have learned to use it also for our benefits. So as humankind progress, this evolution had impacts on the development of technologies, habits, priorities, reflected in the diversities of traditions and religion in the different environmental and cultural context. Nature attributes to culture, and culture is very much embedded in a natural setting. Therefore, rather than an exclusive approach to culture and nature, trying to look at them separately, it's very important to look at the inherent connections. The need will be to see the settlements in the larger territorial context, a context that was, very well brought forth by Mr. Kulkarni and Mr. Punjabi in the last, webinar that we had, and try to look at the multiple interrelationships that define these connections. So considering this nature-culture connection will ensure the long-term sustainability of both. And its contribution will also, work towards the resilience of the communities. So as part of documentation, I think your work, would, as though you are architectural students, it's not only we are looking at, measure drawing of individual buildings, but you are actually going to look at these buildings in some kind of a context of the setting that we are looking at. That is a natural setting and how it has relations with the communities, with the people, with the traditions, the religion, that is actually a worship there. So we are very much, we really look forward to this activity, and this training and capacity workshop, it has been, been coordinated at ICOMOS India level with the West Zone, because we have, India is divided into different zones as far as ICOMOS is concerned, which Poonam ma'am will talk about. And we also have many other scientific committees. From that, one is on cultural landscape, which has got many of these experts, two of them will be coming forth in your webinars. And they'll be talking about this subject in more detail. We have EPWG, which is basically Emerging Professionals Working Group, which is a group of people who are, just started off in the profession, and which is very important to get their perspective of, how they look at this whole scenario. And we also have National Scientific Committee on Education and Training, which actually works on capacity building and training, and which will be also part of this venture. So we really look forward to this, and especially when we look at this entire exercise as a whole, in the sense of, till the end of the publication and the brainstorming that will continue over the time, whether you are on site also, even after you come back, your presentations, and we as, by we, I mean the experts from our ICOMOS India will be interacting with you even after you come back, and will be brainstorming with you about, you know, the what you saw there, what was the implications of that and the entire study. So, and which will finally come off definitely in a very good publication. So all the very best to all of you. And I think it's a perfect place for you because you have just, you know, had 1 year of your architecture and you still have time to go. So, you know, you are set to get into a very good understanding of what architecture is all about, especially when we look at this entire context. And this will be a very good learning for you for your way forward in your student life as well as after that for the professional life. So all the very best from me. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I request architect Poonam Tambaria, ma'am, to introduce ICOMOS India West Zone to these students. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ramya. I think we had already, this is the second lecture and we had already introduced ICOMOS India and West Zone. So I'll not take a lot of time, but again, West Zone, as Niyati said, that West Zone is a part of the 6 zones with a part of the ICOMOS India and decentralized. And this activity we have positioned in the West Zone with collaborations with various NSCs and the EPWG group. The purpose largely is to understand the setting of the historic area in the natural context. The initial 2 lectures by Mr. Raman and Mr. Girish, they established nicely the context and the nature in which you would be studying your architecture. And today we hope with architect Suryanarayana Murthy and architect Onkar, we can establish and bridge this gap which is there between the nature, culture and built. So that is the purpose, I think, and as Niyati again said, that this will set for you how to do sensitive architecture. I mean, you will all study in your further goings that how to respond to context. You will be studying iconic architecture, but the purpose today and the documentation and understanding today is to understand how architecture can be sensitive, how architecture can be one with culture and nature. So again, all the very best from me and from the West Zone and all the others who have been working towards making this happen. Thank you and all the best wishes.
Thank you, Poonam ma'am. Now I think we don't have to, you know, wait for this anymore. So let us get into the nuances of understanding what is cultural landscape in the context of India. It is with great pleasure that I invite Suryanarayana Murthy sir to give a presentation on this topic. So GSV Suryanarayana Murthy, practicing conservation architect, is currently working as a professor of architecture in JBR College of Architecture, Hyderabad. He is an independent consultant in the field of architecture, conservation, planning, and urban design. He is proprietor of organizations, namely KSHETRA and IHSRDM. He is currently South Zone representative of ICOMOS India. He is also coordinator of NSC on cultural landscapes of ICOMOS. He has published several papers in the area of traditional architecture, conservation in national and international magazines, journals, and newspapers. In July 2021, under his leadership, Kakatiya Rudreshwara Temple in Telangana got the recognition of UNESCO World Heritage. I welcome you, sir, to deliver this insightful webinar. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. In terms of how do we need to understand the overall idea? How do we need to understand the typologies? And how do we represent these? So this I will be demonstrating with the help of some of the images and some with the field studies that I have undertaken, and also some of the work which is part of my research work on cultural landscapes of India, along with Professor Rana P.B. Singh and also Professor Nalini Thakur, which is in the initial stages of work. I will be demonstrating because this is going to be for the documentation work, architectural documentation work that you would be taking up in the Western Ghats landscape region. So the settlements, architecture, geography, landscape, these are the terminologies that we will be using in this. There are some interesting images, because fundamentally we perceive, in order to represent any cultural landscape, we use a map, or we use like this. I have used India map to demonstrate how a few cultural landscapes are perceived, or why they are termed as cultural landscapes, is demonstrated over the map of India. There is another interesting map which some of you may have come across. This is by Thomas Debrett, who has represented the geographical features and sacred places, historical places, and the landforms across India. What are the mental images that we have about geography of India? So this shows an image as an idea what constitutes a cultural landscape, whether it is a geographical notion, whether it is a place notion, or whether it is an idea perceived by people, what it is exactly. And we are aware India has diverse physical geography with hills, mountains, the geography which you're all going to explore, the settlements across the Western Ghats you're going to explore. We have, this is all known to us, but I have demonstrated with the help of some images, and one of the maps which represents the sites of during the time of Mahabharat time, so which was mentioned as Bharatavarsha. So the Bharatavarsha, as represented, as noted, as known in the epic of Mahabharata. So what were the places, and what are the locations, and what were the physiological features, and what cultures existed, what kind of living. So it is in general a geographical understanding, a physical setup of land and its relationship with people. That is what we are going to study in cultural landscapes. There are various concepts now we have in the parlance of UNESCO, international heritage sites. We have terminologies of historic urban landscapes. We have Indian cultural landscapes. What does it mean by Indian cultural landscapes? The idea that is part of Indian theory, Indian understanding, Indian memory. That is Indian cultural landscape. So it can be a sacred landscape. It can be a geographical, physiological landscape, or it can be people regard the place with respect, with devotion, with faith, and their life and day-to-day activity is connected. People's life and day-to-day activity is connected with the establishments, settlements, networks that are created. So whether the nature exists first or humans exist first, that is a question that should be part of our mind when we are looking at the places termed as cultural landscapes, because the terminology landscapes is borrowed from nature and natural and ecological systems, natural systems, whereas cultural is from the human-made systems. So when you have human-made systems, which is represented and understood by several people, authored by several people in geography, in architecture, in landscapes, in acoustics, in ecology, how people have viewed. So we will look at those definitions also. And places are also related to Vastu Purusha Mandala. When a place is designated, that itself becomes a geography and notion identity. And it is known to people, it is known to architects how identities of architecture is denoted, understood, represented by means of styles of architecture, form of architecture, and patterns of architecture. And we have these patterns extending from building level to like Vastu Purusha Mandala at a building level to Vastu Purusha Mandala at a city level, that is Jaipur city. And we have various landscapes across India, various natural landscapes, which various tribal life settlements, landscapes across India, and sacred routes, annual fairs, annual festivals, where people gather and represent a particular location, like we have in Telangana, Medaram Jatara that happens, biannual congregation of tribal festival. It's a fair and festival that happens, and Kumbh Mela, and we have Varkari Waris, Jnaneswar Wari in Maharashtra, which is an annual fair. And across India, various locations are connected with geographies formed, temporary geographies and continuous geographies formed by habitations or activities of people, with the culture of people, life of people, and beliefs of people, faiths of people. That is their behavior and their pluralism, which are time bound and sometimes moving, dynamic. They all represent cultural landscapes. As we understand from, we have one UNESCO recognized World Heritage Site, Bhimbetka Cultural Landscape. So as we understand Bhimbetka Cultural Landscape, and as we understand the Braj landscape, as we understand the Varanasi Cultural Landscape, as we understand the Medaram Jatara Cultural Landscape, and the Majuli Cultural Landscape in Assam, there are different patterns and different meanings to all these places. And there are, according to UNESCO, there are clearly defined cultural landscapes, and they could be organically evolved and associative. Organically evolved are more close to nature, tribal, and hill region kind of landscapes where we are going to study. I am referring to some of the established definitions, and people who have worked on cultural landscapes widely, who has worked on this is Professor Rana P. Singh, who is a geographer, and who has mentioned about Indian cultural landscape is a collective perception of geography, collective perception of memory, and collective perception of information and imagination that happens in the form of a landscape. And it happens in the mind, it happens in the life, it happens in the activity, as we see in Braj landscape or Jnaneshwar Wari at Pandharpur and Kumbh Mela, any such. And there are others also who have worked, like Amita Sinha, who has worked on Varanasi and Braj landscapes, and Nalini Thakur, who has mentioned about there should be a clear definition on Indian cultural landscape, which is connected with memory, that is faith and memory are connected, and within the beliefs of people, how people perceive and understand these places. So all the definitions are required to be understood, and I will also be demonstrating 2 examples after this theoretical presentation. And look at these images. One of these on the left side is by Doxiadis from acoustics. We have the concept established in the form of a region, or in the form of a settlement, and in the form of connections. And we know this famous diagram of Doxiadis, where humans are connected in the form of a settlement, and it is applicable to urban to rural systems anywhere. And similarly, ecological system from a cell to ecosphere that exists in this world, where we have landscape and ecosystem and community and population that is forming in the which is a cyclic thing, but which there is a cell, tissue, organ system, organism, population from a natural system. So this is where landscape and between population forms the cultural activity, which is connected with nature all around and also the sky above. So what we see from Panchabhutas, 5 elements of nature, as explained by Rana P.B. Singh, and as we see in this ecological system diagram, are similar. So these landscapes have various images to be understood. We have Varanasi. So some of the images that we keep getting to understand what does it mean by a cultural landscape. In simple terms, it is the mental image created by people, believed by people, by associating themselves with their surroundings. That is how a geographer defines. See these images, it is well connected to faith, people, and life. So these images are representatives of sacred landscapes. Sacred landscapes as defined by mental picture and image as we live in the physical world, and as can be seen in the interpretations. So Varanasi with the surrounding geography, surrounding places, and it is also interpreted in terms of, these are from Rana P.B. Singh, which has defined the cosmological entity. So Rana P.B. Singh had conducted the physical verification of the geometrical interpretation of Kashi among people. So from pilgrimage, literature, and geographical existence, he has verified and established these notions as they exist in the geography, form, and the overall idea and the physical existence. So he has verified and published several works on cultural landscape. So what we see in this type of landscape, what we see in Western Ghats is going to be different. So we need to understand and differentiate what constitutes a historical urban landscape, what constitutes this kind of sacred landscape. And I'm also going to show another one settlement, and what constitutes a regional landscape to a settlement level landscape. In the case of Majuli in Assam, I'm going to show that. These are some more images of evolution of Varanasi, as we see geographical evolution from 900 Christian era to 1930 Christian era, how it has formed. But the core has remained at one place, which was giving. So it is viewing from the physical evolution perspective. Physical evolution, so physical geography, historical geography, a place and landscape can be understood from historical evolution. But at the same time, it can also be understood from what people really believe from the location. Within that location, how do they understand their place? How do they have been, how they had been living at that particular place, and how they had been connecting themselves with the location and natural systems around. This is one of the recent developments and how these landscapes undergoing change. Similar to this, we have seen a sacred landscape in Varanasi, in Srirangam town, which is a historic landscape, but this is also connected with architecture and making of architecture at a grand scale. So making of architecture at a grand scale, and how the identities and urban scale identities also get established in this type of landscapes, with construction of gopurams, construction of temple complexes and settlements within the temple complex, and the overall city form itself as a geography, as a city identity from the distance and in the memories of people, and when people visit at the human scale in the daily activity. Because those who are performing their daily activities, they may not be able to see any part of the total map of Srirangam town. They will look at only at the ground level. What they see is only Gopuram. Everyday activity is connected with Gopuram. What geographers look at as a overall city form is a larger thing, as what urban designers look at as a whole form is consisting of various urban forms and settlements and networks. The overall city form is looked at. So it differs from when you are looking at from the place from various disciplines. These are some more images, and now I am coming to another landscape, completely contrasting landscape, which was listed as a cultural landscape site as different from Bhimbetka. Bhimbetka is a rock outcrop where you have people living and documenting their life and documenting their beliefs, documenting, and they established their existence by means of paintings. So looking at the paintings and undisturbed authentic location of those times got recognized as a cultural landscape. The rock outcrop and the cave habitations and paintings. Coming to this next part, we have Majuli. This is in Assam. This is in Assam. And their life is connected with water. It is in the midstream of Brahmaputra River. The midstream of Brahmaputra River, as you see, their cultural activities, people inhabited by about population of 1,50,000. Those who follow 15th century Srimanta Shankar Deva's Vaishnavism. It is reformed Vaishnavism, new Vaishnavism, as different from earlier Bhakti movement Vaishnavism of Ramanujacharya, but it is a completely northeastern new Vaishnavism. It is by Srimanta Shankar Deva, and in their life, both because they live in the land in the midstream of Brahmaputra river, and their activities are connected to cultural activities, festivals, always related to boat, water, and Vaishnavism is after Krishna. So they relate their cultural life also because of the religious leaders and religious gurus. They relate with Vrindavan, Mathura, that is the Brajbhumi of Uttar Pradesh. Historically, the cultural life and Bhakti movement as it evolved in that place. So they, from morning to evening, their activities reflect that connection with the landscape, and how that is reflected in their architecture, from their and how they maintained their original connection to the land, nature, and earlier hill settlements and river settlements. Though that continued, at the same time there is an imposition and there is a formation of a new Vaishnavism that that was integrated into the life, and the settlements also reflect that. The evolution can be clearly seen in this place. So the Majuli cultural landscape, Majuli is about 900 square kilometers land in the midstream of Brahmaputra river. So, comes from north, from China, enters into Arunachal Pradesh and travels across Assam, and you have in the midstream this Majuli island with with the establishment of around 64 Vaishnava institutions, forming settlements around the institutions. And now you have only 32 in number out of 64. And those 32 institutions called satras have habitations, settlements. So there is total landscape is water. Total landscape is going to be Ghat, Western Ghat, and you have small settlements. One Kudase village that you are going to document. Like that, there are 32 and institutions around which there are villages, which are occupied by 100 people, 250 people, and 300 residences around these institutions. So all put together about now 1,70,000 population approximately. So how the meaning of landscape changes from settlement to regional level to larger regional level to, as within Assam across Brahmaputra river to a place near landscape with water and water streams, and that itself forming small settlement, and within this settlement you have structures evolved from earlier vernacular architecture. So how earlier vernacular architecture got transformed and adapted by the most evolved system of construction, materials and buildings and settlements. So this is a very strong identity that can be seen from adaptation to even integration, and you have complete leap away from nature. So you have a most evolved structures also visible within the same settlement. So Majuli Cultural Landscape region is a very larger portion, having passing through this Brahmaputra river, and it is surrounded by Brahmaputra actually takes a smaller stream here and larger stream on the southern side, forming this island. I will stop this and I will share another presentation. Can you see this full screen?
We can see your presentation, sir, not in full screen.
Okay, fine. I will continue with this.
Yes. Yes, sir.
So I'm showing now to break another example, also to extend some meaning for our work at Kudase village, how these landscapes are required to be understood. I'm demonstrating with one paper which we presented along with another architect, Mr. Kiran, in an international conference. This is our physical study, directly physical study on ground. There is a coastal Andhra Pradesh region termed as Konasima, and there you have a settlement, geometrically established settlement during early 1900s. So you have 100-year and 120 years, 130-year-old buildings, people who migrated in that region, adapting themselves and evolving a regional identity, which looks like the place identity and rooted to the place. These are the typical houses that we find, and we call this as that is the reason we said the typical identity that we see is in the Godavari river side settlements in coastal Andhra Pradesh. What are the qualities that we see in that area? So demonstrated by Peruru Agraharam settlement. And what we see in the termed as it's a regional phenomenon. The same identity can be seen in entire Konasima region. Similar identity can be seen in architecture, in the pattern of settlements, in the way the networks are created, because these were mainly connected with land and human activity. So let us see some of the definitions, I think, which we should have. And Call Sar, who was talking about cultural landscape, first time who has coined this, it is by a cultural group, by communities. And culture is the agent, and the nature, the area around it is the medium. The result is cultural landscape. And it is a reflection of activities, traditions, faith, belief, with heritage values, traditional heritage values, which is handed down from previous fathers, forefathers, previous generations. And human alteration of this landscape, however, is because of agriculture. We can see across cultures, across civilizations, with the advent of agriculture itself, the change in the landscape could be seen by people, by different crops and adapting to the climate, according to the climate. So similarly, their habitation forms also. And we have, if you search on cultural landscape sites across the world, you will find some sites like rice terraces of Indonesia. Some of them are already part of this cultural landscape identification under UNESCO World Heritage Sites. They contain various features connected to cultural activities and cultural making over the land, cultural implants. So that is why we call agriculture. So it is also a part of culture. As I mentioned in the beginning itself, it cannot be termed and defined only with one type of or one method of definition because of its diversity across India. And I will also simplify at the end of this presentation for us to understand in a simple term. So we have, because of the geographical, climatic diversity, the linguistic and diversity, all these have formed because of the migrations, movements, and connections, activities. That is the reason I have brought in the idea of acoustics and ecology into discussion. So the cultural diversity and cultural plurality in India makes it to define the Indian cultural landscape also as plural and as diverse. So it cannot be defined only in one form and one method. As you would see in Andhra Pradesh, this Godavari River, the area where these settlements between these two Godavari channels reaching Bay of Bengal have these settlements across. And there is a natural irrigation system that is formed, and there is a rice bowl of India, it used to be called, and you have the pattern of settlements following the geometry. But this particular town in Peruru, as you could see, they established such a gridiron pattern. What you would see, it is just only about 1.8 kilometer by 2.3 kilometer range, 1.8 by 2.3 kilometer range. And there are festivals and there are villages. All these villages that you see are connected by fairs and festivals, annual fairs and seasonal fairs, seasonal festivals. Most of them are connected to climate, agriculture, and agricultural crop produce. And it is across India also, like Makar Sankranti, which comes during Makar Sankraman, which celebrates the winter solstice, the movement of shift of sun from Dakshinayan to Uttarayan, which is celebrated during the produce coming from agriculture. So all these villages and life is connected with, closely connected with river Godavari, and the presence of water channels formed by natural irrigation systems, and also human-made irrigation systems later created. They're dotted by several settlements across the various small water channels and human-made irrigation channels later. This is another area, agricultural system. And looking at the pattern of settlements, one is at Gangalakuru, Agraharam, Agreshwaram, Gangalakuru, Munganda, and Peruru, Agraharam. All these form a pattern, and when it comes to the building level, they follow almost same materials, same forms repeated across the regional landscape. So it's a regional cultural landscape. So one has to look at from the larger environmental system to climatic system to their agricultural practices to the total building system, from bottom of the building to top of the building, foundation to the subterranean system and substructure, superstructure, and the roof system is required to be studied. So the architectural character, as you see, is by front raised platforms and colonnaded veranda, which connects the interior portion. So it is an inward residence. So that also has typologies. Some of them have courtyards, which are rich in nature, having even the type of it consists of additional facilities. So when we are looking at settlement, it cannot be just viewed from the simple architectural components. What is their occupation? What is where do they live? Why do they have a bigger one? Are they connected with some kind of a part of a social system within the village? So these and their occupation levels, their income levels is required to be looked at in terms of what do they do in terms of their occupation every day. So how that is connected to their habitation. So that kind of ground real things are required to be captured when we are looking at architectural character. And there is a famous, as I talked about, Kumbh Mela and also Medaram Jatara and Dhaneshwar Wari in Maharashtra. Like that, there are festivals and fairs which create landscapes across India. Such type of landscapes is one such is this Perur Agraharam area having this Prabhala Tirtham, which happens annually during Makara Sankraman time, which is a very large gathering that happens and connected with 11 villages. So it moves from one village to another villages, but at the same time these are connected with surrounded by these 11 villages also. 20 like that, around 150 villages gather and move as a procession from one place to another place, carrying these chariot like structures which are built in one village. As you would see, the movement of that Prabhala Tirtham is happening, the procession is happening. There are other festivals which create and connected with so the landscape can also be seen from the natural perspective, and as it is borrowed from the natural system, plants and the species that exist. And these are very much connected with, and we are all familiar with that Ganesh festival, which is connected with 21 leaves, and this festival is also celebrated with a lot of movement and connections with people among villages. So the landscape is connected in terms of dynamic activity, not just only as a mental notion itself. So they perceive this as a region, Konosima region, Konosima location, not as a simple building or settlement, but as a region that is perceived. As you would see the daily life in these places, there are various cultural activities and cultural things connected with this. And I will take another 4 to 5 minutes more just to conclude my presentation, where I will be defining. We have seen in the first part of the presentation the basic diversity that exists in the definition of cultural landscapes, and in this Peruru Agraharam from architecture to settlement to buildings and their cultural activities we have seen. Now I will be showing another presentation which will be helpful to differentiate, though there is an overlap between traditional, historical and vernacular. There is always an overlap because it is a holistic understanding. That is what we need to have an Indian cultural landscape understanding, rather than subject-wise and discipline-wise understanding. That means all the entire understanding happens together, parallelly, simultaneously, in a holistic and integrated manner. So the overlap is visible in terms of traditional architecture capturing, vernacular architecture capturing, and historical architecture capturing. So that definitions and differentiation I will try to show now. Could you see my full screen, at least now?
Yes, sir. I mean, it's the same present. I mean, it is showing the same way as it was showing previously, but yeah.
Okay, fine. So I would like to just differentiate this vernacular, historical, and traditional here, which is also part of one of my research work that is happening. As part of ICOMOS 1999 vernacular architecture definition, it is by which communities build by themselves, and it is a continuous process with changes and continuous adaptation as a response to social and environmental constraints. We have seen in Majuli, we have seen, and what do we need to relate when we are looking at cultural landscapes and geographical? This is a geographical phenomenon. Because of the geographical features, people create their settlements and structures, and along with what is connected in terms of culture and what is connected in terms of faiths, beliefs, and overall idea of the world. So their understanding and idea of the world is also reflected in making of this. And what is traditional architecture then? As I said in the beginning itself, it is an overlap, vernacular, traditional, and historical. Traditional is what is developed with the exchange of culture and ideas. And it is established one. It is why it is an established one? Because it is visible in a standard format at several places. At standard format at several places. What we see, what we had seen, if they had built in using a Vastu Shastra book and exactly the similar way for all buildings, it is traditional. And vernacular.
Sorry, sir. Sir, sorry for cutting in. I think the slides are not moving.
Slides are no. I'm this one.
We can see the first slide actually.
Okay.
Yes. Now we can see the slides moving.
I think I will do this.
Yes.
I will do this for. So the vernacular was the. You have seen this?
No, sir. We were on the first slide actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Now we can see it moving. Yeah.
So now I was talking about vernacular. Vernacular is connected with local, connected with geography, connected with nature. That is vernacular. By communities when they with the changes happening and connect themselves with the land and surroundings. That is the you see some disturbance. Yeah. Now, traditional is by which is established and which is similar by means of traditions followed by people across the location, across the region, across the place. And when it comes to historical, which have gained prominence in history. So we study historical buildings. They represent significant time in history. So they are representative structures, significant. The moment I have classified, don't jump into conclusions of we have got some definitions ready-made in hand. So this is not anything, it is a very overlapping definition. So historical exists along with traditional, and it exists along with climatic, that is natural, vernacular. So it coexists, it is together always, that is the world. But when you are looking at vernacular, it is more closely connected to the ground, the location, and when these kind of structures are built, there could be historical reasons by which this much of activity would have happened. There could be very varied historical reasons for the existence of these structures, whereas the traditional, which are established by means of a traditional science of construction, Vastu Shastra, Vastu texts across India, such type of text building and giving like modern day buildings today with the knowledge of engineering, architecture. That is how we are, with that established science and method of building, we are doing structures and building today. So what constitutes vernacular architecture? It constitutes site, location, people, and climate and materials. That is what is the total matrix that is required to be their occupation, their culture, their surroundings, soil that is available, what is the topography, what kind of minerals are available to make tools and equipments, and how they are placed, how they are connected with other places, how they are related in terms of economics, what kind of economy system, whether it is bartering system or how do they live morning to evening, the daily cycle, seasonal cycle. Everything is connected to the making of the settlement. It is not just only every day morning to evening only decides the life and settlement. The daily cycle, seasonal cycle, annual cycle, which would have made generations of people to settle. There could be possibility of, especially in hill regions, shifting settlements, like shifting cultivation. So that also should be kept in mind when we are looking at such. This is all from some of the literature from cultural geography book, where across India, how local based structures exist across India. So this is all decided by the climatic zones. So what are the climatic zones we study in climatology? Climatology and climate response to structures. So one has to be aware about this pattern. So that defines a geographical pattern. Geographical pattern means landscape pattern. Across India map, you have settlement pattern. The way people build in these places is because of the climatic pattern. So the climate, there will be similarities between partially with coastal Andhra Pradesh and mid Andhra Pradesh. So that pattern, there will be similarity of climatic options. That is how, so what is grounded close to the climate, what is grounded close to the land and materials, what is grounded close to the minerals, what is grounded to the cultural life and economics of people. And another part that we should be aware of is agricultural. Agri is also agroclimatic zones, where it is possible to cultivate, what kind of things are possible for cultivation, what is not possible. So there are portions in West Coast and also the partially 9, 10 and 12 constitute the landscape that we are going to study. But across India, and having an idea about agroclimatic zones helps us why people cultivate in a particular area in a particular fashion, what kind of crops are produced, and what kind of food they take, what kind of living they have, what kind of kitchen, what kind of life, what kind of daily cycle. All this is connected to the climate and climatic zones. What is the mineral source that is available? So in some portions stones are available. Some portions brick and mud is abundantly available because of the rivers, because of the soil, because in some portions wood is abundantly available. In some portions bamboo is abundantly available. Palm leaf and grass is abundantly available. So solid mud bricks, sun-dried bricks, burnt bricks, burnt clay bricks. The material choice is because of the material across. So it's a geographical pattern. Cultural landscape is also geographical pattern. So one has to look at the geography of the resources that are available around that. Roofing materials, what kind of bamboo roofs, woods and grasses, tiles. So why do they do it? See the relationship between roofing materials and wall materials, agroclimatic zones and climatic zones. There is a relationship. That is the level of connection from holistic to small component level and building level understanding that is required in the cultural landscape understanding of a region, of a place and of a location. The roof and plan forms of rural settlements. What are the roof types? See how interestingly these are represented over the Indian geographical map. They can also be represented, this literature I have already shared with the faculty for this purpose, where the construction type and their settlement form and their building form, architecture form, how it is represented over the geographical. Though it may not be similar for all, but regionally there is a pattern. Regionally there is a pattern of construction and the choice of materials to understand vernacular architecture of these regions. Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, there is a typical pattern connected to these areas. Gujarat, Rajasthan, Western Ghats, Western region, Rajasthan. These are all some of the during 1960s Census Department, Census of India has done a survey across India, which has documented this vernacular architecture. So one might find some references of 1960 Census of India. If you could access, you may be able to get some secondary sources. It must have transformed today, but it will be useful to know the method of undertaking a study of Indian geography and cultural geography and cultural landscape. These are all related terminologies. That is why I am deliberately using it to have this terminology in our discussion and work, the future work that you are going to do. We have some of them in Gujarat and Rajasthan and Gujarat, and so Gangetic Plains. All these are documented across India of from India in these census book. Madhya Pradesh, some of the tribal houses, and Odisha, some of the settlement patterns. So what kind of things one has to capture? Human related, cultural related, and physical structures related, buildings related. And in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Karnataka, there are various types of regional patterns, and most of them are connected with, again, this climatic zone, wall material type, roof material type. So why they choose a particular material for the roof? Why they choose a particular material for the wall? Why the plastering material is like this? It is because of the resources and natural resources that are available. So that kind of a search is required. So the first documenting this natural resources and across the geography is important when you go to the, so that you will be able to establish the real logic of this closeness to the landscape and geography. That is very much required when we are documenting. So with this, I will be closing my presentation. These are some of the images in other areas also, like Tripura and Assam. We have just now seen Assam Majuli cultural landscape, and tribal mishing house, Miri house of raised on bamboo stilts with a grass over it, roof material. Because it is close to the water bodies, river, one has to prevent oneself from the floods. So they have adapted and created these kind of systems in the region. So I'm showing some of the references, and we know for historical buildings, we study history of architecture. Bannister Fletcher is known to all of us. So historical buildings represent one stock of buildings. Traditional buildings represent another stock of buildings. Vernacular architecture represents another stock of buildings. And this is Amos Rappaport by House Form and Culture and Encyclopedia of Vernacular Architecture of the World. These two are one of the important sources of vernacular architecture. So with this, I'm concluding, and thank you very much. I hope I have not taken more time.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. I think this was a very necessary session, and I think you have, shown what all aspects one has to look at, when we look at cultural landscape in a very comprehensive manner, and especially, talking about the relationships of, the different climatic zones and the materials used, and how, the way vernacular architecture actually develops. Which becomes a reflection of all these. I think that was very well put together, and we are extremely thankful to you for showing us, taking us through these examples and elaborating this for us. So thank you so much, sir. And I think now we can move to our next speaker, that is architect Onkar Lebudkar. He's a landscape architect. He is affiliated as an associate professor at Srimati Kashibai Navale College of Architecture, Pune. And he's an academician and practicing landscape architect from the last for the last 16 years. His interest areas are theatre, film, and ecology. His interest in environment and ecology has led him to study Tillari region for his master's thesis, and where he mapped conflict areas between human and wildlife around the settlements in and around Tillari Conservation Reserve. So he will be talking to us about his master's thesis work on Tillari bioregion, mapping conflict of man and nature. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah. Should I start my screen?
Yes.
Just let me know if you can see the screen. Yeah.
Yes, we are able to see the screen. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks a lot for inviting me for this lecture. I thank the College of Architecture and ICOMOS. So this is my thesis presentation for my landscape architecture master, which I have studied the landscape management plan and for the Tillari bioregion where you people are visiting now for second year. Uh, so it's very interesting sort of a region. I will talk about it in a detail that how I have studied and what is the conflict zones, and my prime concern of the study was to study the conflict of man and animal and what sort of change in landscape is happening in those areas, and what is the result of the change of landscape and the man and animal conflict, and when it has started and what is the implications of it, and what should we do to prevent it, or what how to engage with the overall landscape and the conflict. So this was my main objective. So first, I think Raman and Paddeshi has already have talked about the forest and ecology of forest in first two lectures. So I will just go briefly through this, that what is a forest, and there are about 6 categories of forest overall in the world. And then as we come to India, again there are 6 categories of Indian forests, where we have divided or India into 6 forest lands. And then the protected areas in the region of India. So there are 3 or 4 major categories which are called national park, then wildlife sanctuaries, then conservation reserve, and then community reserve. So there is a difference between conservation reserve and community reserve. Where conservation reserve you have only forest, and where community reserve you have a forest and people living together. And then there are 2 different types, which are biosphere, which is related to water, and then tiger reserve. So these are broadly considered as 6 major protected areas of forest in India. Now I've studied the Western Ghat, which you people have briefly come across. It starts from Gujarat till Kanyakumari, and how it has spread. So biodiversity briefly starts, hotspot briefly starts at Gujarat. As you go down towards Kerala, it goes on increasing. The biodiversity within the forest goes on increasing because of the topography, because of the climate, and because of the forests. So this is the overall map of the Western Ghat as we know about, and this is the flora and fauna. If you have the photographs, some major photographs of the flora and fauna what we observe in the Western Ghat. Now we come to the origin. Sorry, I'm taking tea here. So we come to our main focused area of study. So why Tillari is so important for me and for everyone, and it should be very important for everyone. So as you can see, Tillari is exactly situated in between Maharashtra, Karnataka and Goa. So it's called as a tri-region boundary. And it shares the boundary, not only the boundary, but the jungle or forest boundaries has been shared with Radhanagari, then Goa and Karnataka. And it's a migrating sort of a corridor for the big mammals like elephant, tiger, Indian gawa. So these 3 major mammals have been sort of spotted over here for last few decades now. And now we have found, sorry, that it is a breeding sort of a hotspot for tigers. Mostly what happens, the tiger never breed at the spot where it is not safe for them. But now we have this scientific evidences where we can say that Tillari is becoming sort of a breeding spot for tigers also. So it's very important. For the last 10 years we have done the research over here. I think Punjabi also have talked about it. And it's very important that we should conserve or we should protect the Tillari region. And as you can see in the map, in between it connects to Radhanagri Vales, and which goes to Sahyadri Reserve, which is at Mahabaleshwar, and then it goes further up. So it's very important that this Tillari region has to be protected. And why it has to be protected, we'll come to it later, that what is happening to Tillari in these days. So this is the typical region. Now, these are the case studies which I have done. I will go through it very briefly, that the Sahyadri corridor and how the Sahyadri corridor has been changing over the years with its forest and with its agricultural land use and grasslands, and how does it's affecting the overall landscape of the Sahyadri corridor. So these are the few graphs and maps that I have studied to the paper. Then we come to the second case study, which is Costa Rica forest land. That how from 1987 to 2017, how Costa Rica has reformed or regenerated their forest lands. So in 1940 they have only 70. In the 1940 they have 75% of forest land, which in 1987 comes down to 21%. And now in 210, they have regenerated the 52% of their forest again. So what was the process that they have gone through, and what are the measures that they have taken into consideration to regenerate that forest? And then the case studies of Swapnagandha and Wilderness. These are two resorts again at the border of Karnataka, Goa and Maharashtra, where they have secured the 700 of forest land, and it has now become a sort of a hotspot within the Chorla Ghat itself. And how they have generated the economy, how they have generated the biodiversity through this project. And this is my research actually on this Swapnagandha and Wilderness, which I have done the case studies of this for my thesis, and this comparison. Now we come to Dodamag. So Dodamag is situated in Sindhudurg, okay, and this is the bottommost sort of a taluka. In this Dodamag, there are about 25 gram panchayats, and within this, now you are going to study, I think, Kudase village, which is again at the. So what I have done is I have divided this entire sort of 60,000 square kilometer area into 5 different zones, which have got a maximum sort of a conflict zones because of crop pattern change, because of animals, and different sort of reasons for it. So the dark green patches are the forest, which are the conserved forest areas. And within Dodamag, there is a private forest area, which is sort of in the pockets, which connects to this conserved forest areas. So I have studied the type of soil. These studies of type of soil, then taxonomy, shows you what sort of a soil is there, what sort of a texture of soil is there. So basically we found that alluvial soil is there, and for the rock we've seen that basalt is there as a major rock formation. According to the study of soil, we see the relief map and slope analysis. This relief map shows us the elevations of the ground. Okay, so maximum is 0 to 50 meter, which we can see acts as a basin area. So basin area is where the water gets collected. So this region is a Tillari river region. So that's why it's called as a Tillari bioregion. So Tillari is the main river which flows from Kolhapur towards Sawantwadi, meets to the sea. So this is the catchment area of the Tillari region. So around this Tillari dam and Tillari river, the entire biodiversity has developed. So as you can see, the dark patches has the elevation of about 600 to 800 meter, and at the bottom it goes to around 50 meters. So it has the elevation about 800 meters, okay, overall. So the central portion acts as a catchment area where you can catch the water, and the entire sort of Sindhudurg and Savantwadi is depending on the Tillari region. Where now you can see that this is the slope, whereas this is the Sahyadri, which flows around Dodamarg, and it has got sort of a different landscape as you come from top to bottom. And because of the change in elevation, there is a change in sort of a landscape and change in vegetation also. Now this is the study of hydrology, as we are seeing that from the slopes, okay, this catchment area has been here in the dark blue patch, and as we can see at the elevations, or higher elevations, we can see it's sort of a dense green forest, which is a moist green forest, and as you come down, it is a deciduous green forest. So there are two types of forests we can see within this area of 60,000 square kilometer area. There are two types of forests. Upper part is mostly uh, green for evergreen forest with moist, and as we come down, it is evergreen forest but deciduous. So deciduous basically is just pangal hote, as we can see, it shades the leaves, and the upper portion, it remains evergreen always. Okay, and according to that, we can see there are changes in the animal pattern also. So the upper portion of the land, we can see a lot of monkeys, a lot of sort of a mammal population is there on the upper portion. On this upper portion is at the boundaries, and as we come down to the lower portion, there's a lot of sort of a bird variations are there. So bird diversity is at the lower portion, and at the upper portion it mostly has the mammal population. But we can see the study of biodiversity and the pattern of sort of a movement. So this is a Dodamarg. This yellow line shows us the migrations of tiger and gawa, and this red line shows us the migration of elephant and tiger and black panther, basically. So you can see these elevations of different zones through the sections. So first zone is Bambaude, Katavade, and Hevade, which is here in the green portion, where you can see the uppermost portion is very high, and you can see the density of mammals over here. Then you come to the second zone, which is connected to one first zone. It has also the same elevation as one, and it has got an ample of mammal population. As you come down to zone 4 and 5, which is Parme, Godge, Boden, then Kudase. So Kudase comes in zone 5. It's a very small sort of tiny village at the bottom. So Kudase, Sateli, and Boden. These have got, as you can see in the section, it's very sort of a flat elevations. So act as a catchment area also, and had a sort of lot of bird diversity considered to the upper zones 1, 2, and 3. Then study of biodiversity of flora. So again, here you can see according to the elevations, there has been changes in the pattern of trees and changes in the pattern of vegetation. So zone 1, 2, and 3 have the moist deciduous forest, where specific species of flora has found, and you can see maximum mammal population in these areas. Whereas zone 4 and 5 has more dry deciduous forest with lot of bird diversity. Now, most of the forest has a cover of a bamboo plantation within the forest, which is helpful to flourish the flora and fauna in Tillari bioregion, and it's very important for the migration of elephants. So elephant have got this thick sort of a skin, so they have to scrub the skin when they're traveling. So bamboo help them to clean their skin. So have you ever heard about this mud baths or dust baths? So all these birds and mammals and animals need to have these mud baths and tree baths when they travel within the forest. So these trees help them to sort of grow the skin and take care of the skin. Now we come to the conflict zones of conflict areas. So study of animal conflict. So this is Dodama. So this is the total Sindhudurg district, and then we come to the Dodama. So as we can see, as we have talked about, the upper portion of Dodama has got the maximum sort of a evergreen forest, and also it has got the maximum sort of a conflict between man and animal. So as you can see here, 0 to 10% is at the bottom where there's a maximum bird biodiversity, and at the top it has got the maximum sort of animal and man conflict where you have elephants, gawa, sambar and tiger population concentrated in those small pockets. Now why this is happening, why this conflict areas has been on the upper sort of a portion and what to do. So now we come to the zone wide study. Okay, after, so this is zone 1 as we have seen over here. So as we have talked, so this is zone 1. Okay, so in zone 1 we as I have discovered over here that I have divided this entire study into 3 sort of categories, that afforestation, which shows in a green color, then changing farm pattern. Okay, so afforestation is for your livelihood or for house building, burning the wood. Then changing crop pattern. I think both in first and second lecture, both of them have talked about the changing crop pattern. So what I have done is I have marked the pockets where the changing crop pattern has been taking place, and with the human habitat, which is in a dark brown color. And then I have shown the pattern of movement of the animals and how it is sort of conflicting with each other, whether these patterns of movement are coming in between the farmlands and the forest cutting, whether it is on the slope. So as we can see, the upper portion has been deforested. So you can see the photographs on my right hand side. Okay, and then at the bottom also, that how the changing pattern of crops has been taking place. So over 5 to 10 years, we see that the people are moving from their traditional farming towards the cash crops. So traditional farming like rice, coconut or areca nut was there, but now there is a shift in these crop patterns, 15 to 20% of change in the crop pattern, and it is happening on the slope. Now zone 1 has a very particular and very important Meristica swamp. So what is Meristica swamp? Meristica swamp is a swamp, or it's a type of a tree or a species which comes into fresh water. ठीक आहे, ज्याला खारफुटी म्हणतो आपण, सॉरी मराठीत मी मध्ये बोलतोय. So it comes in a salt water. Okay, but this example is in the only example in Maharashtra where you found a freshwater trees have been seen, and this is the only example in Maharashtra. And what is happening now, this is the location of it. Okay, now what is happening is that there is a afforestation and rubber plantation at the source of that water. So the Meristica Swamp is now getting died. Now it's very important to save this sort of a biologically rich heritage that we have, but I think it's going to get out of hand if we don't take care of this land anymore. So this is about zone 1. Then zone 2, we come to Sonwal, Payal and Medhe. Now here we see that again the same pattern of changing crops, and most of the forest cutting is at the slope uh, of the forest. Now the slopes acts as a sort of a catchment areas or basins for the river, and the secondly they holds on the land, and it does not allow the landslides to happen. But for last 10 to 15 years, the landslides has been increasingly uh, damaging the overall sort of a landscape of the entire area for last 5 to 10 years, because in Konkan, when it rains heavily, and when it rains it take the entire land with it if it is barren. So this forests protect the sort of a Sahyadri, which is sort of a wall at the bottom of the Konkan. So Konkan is always has been protected by the Sahyadri, and the rainfall is much needed for Konkan if this sort of forests are not going to be there. So now we can see that elephant. So what sort of a mammals we can see over here? So elephant, Indian Gawa corridor. It's a main Indian Gawa corridor. Then 80% of a traditional farming like rice, coconut, then Erica nut is there. And this is a conflict zone for elephant, Indian Gawa and monkey and Samba. I've come to zone 3, where this is another sort of interesting area where this elevation of this land or this part of zone 3 has not much as zone 1 and 2. It has got the elevation of about 600 meter, and also it has got the depression or catchment area of about 100 meters. So it has a sort of a moderate slope. But what is happening over here is the traditional farming now has changed to 60%. So the cash crop has been changed to 40%. And because of the cash cropping, what is happening over here is there's a lot of a discrimination between the landowners. Okay. And it's very dangerous for the socio-cultural and economical bonding of this area, as the land holding has been sort of a concentrating into one hand. Okay. Which I have come to later, that what sort of a land holdings are there and what sort of cultural sort of integrity is there. So basically in the Dodama area, the entire sort of a land or the 90% of the land has been held by Brahmins. Okay. And which don't anymore lives over there. So they keep sort of or they sell their private land to the capitalists who are coming from the outside, and they are doing the cash crops over there. Okay. So but the land holding is again goes to the upper caste people, and the lower caste people are working as a sort of a farm laborers over there, which stays at the outside of the villages. So land distribution is not equal in these areas, and that is the main reason for the conflict of the land, and also the conflict of the changing crop pattern. And because of the changing crop pattern, what is happening is animals are trying to sort of move from their traditional path, but now in between this changing crop patterns are coming. So they usually stays in the pineapple sort of a farms, which is now cash crop for them, and they're destroying these pineapple crops because it's readily available food for them. It's not the problem of animals, it's the problem of human being, that how you have to adapt with the nature or adapt with the climate. Okay. Now we come to zone 4, which is has the similar pattern with zone 3. Now this is Kudase, Ambeli and Bershi, where you people are going to study. Now, Tillari River flows from this area of Kudase, Ambeli and Bedshi. So the forest cutting at the corridor areas of the Indian Gawa has been taking place in these areas. And the villages have sort of a flat land and high density of birds and mammals. It's important to control the deforestation um, on the outer edge of the Tillari Conservation Reserve. Now, this Kudase, Ambeli, and Beshi had lot of sort of a private forest lands. Okay, it doesn't have a conservation forest land or conserved forest land, but it holds the private forest land. So, and these forest pockets acts as a corridor for the animals and birds. And if we are going to cut these forest lands and give it for the commercial use, it's going to affect the corridors of the mammals and traveling of the mammals and birds also. So the Indian Gawa corridor wild boar black panther has been spotted in this area of Kudase. And me myself have seen the footprints of black panther. 60% of traditional farming now again from 100% it came down to 60%. So 40% is moving towards the cash crops. So people are moving away from the traditional farming towards the pineapple, cashew, rubber plantations. And so it's dangerous sort of a contract farming is taking over the land. A large number of bird diversity has been affected by this change of crop patterns. Now, what sort of a management guidelines we should have for this? So I've come up with sort of a zone-wise management plan where I have identified the different sort of a critical, so maximum critical affected area, medium critically affected area, and minimum affected area. So minimum affected area where we should intervene now and stop the further damage, and maximum affected areas are where the damage has been already done. Then how to regenerate those areas according to my case studies and my overall field work. So the upper portion, as we have talked about, is the most important to save this swamp. To save it, the rubber plantation which is happening at the top has to stop, and people have to be make aware of the importance of the swamp. Then this zone, the management guideline for the zone 1 is the forest cutting at the slope has to be stopped. Where the cutting is already done, soil stabilization has to be first priority. And in this zone, most of the area is under conservation reserve. So to protect the forest area, strict actions has to be taken for the violation of the norms. And for this we have to take the people into consideration, and we have to take a lot of workshops with the people around it. What is the importance of the forest? It is not like that the people don't know the importance of the forest, but people has to make aware that the private land and the understanding of the private forest land and the connection with the government owned forest land has to make sure that how it goes hand in hand. And see, it's very easy to say that please protect the forest, but we have to give the livelihood to the people also. Okay, with empty stomach we can't talk about ecology. Okay, so we have to provide sort of a generation of jobs, and it's very easy to talk about we will create the jobs and we will give you the jobs, अच्छे दिन हम लाएंगे वगैरह वगैरह. It's very easy to say it, but it's very very difficult to sort of provide sort of a different alternative to the people other than sort of farming. Okay, so I have proposed sort of equal distribution of land among all the castes. Then the sort of a government should take over, as in Costa Rica the government has given sort of a monthly sort of a amount to the people for taking care of the forest. Suppose 5,000 10,000 monthly to take care of the forest. Okay, so that people should not move or sell their land to sort of a capitalist, and they can sort of keep that their lands. So again, according to zone 2, where the deforestation has been taken place, where the crop pattern has been changing, so forest cutting according to the slope, so stabilization of this land, how we can do the stabilization, all these things I have mentioned in this. Then zone 3, where we can see the maximum sort of a damage has been done is in the zone 3 and zone 4. Okay, because as I have said, it has sort of a moderate slope. It doesn't have a sort of a 800 and again come down to 50. It has sort of a 600 meter which comes down gradually to 100 meters. So within this land, it's 400 meters gap in between them. So now and it connects to again the upper regions of Amboli and Radhanagari and Mahabaleshwar, and it's very important sort of a corridor which connects from Karnataka, Goa to the other forest reserves which are at the higher level. So it's very important to protect these private land pockets which comes in between this traveling zones of these animals. Now we can see here that this high hills are now totally sort of the forest has been totally cut within these areas, and it's very important now for protecting these. So maximum affected areas, the cutting of the forest has to be controlled. More ecotourism models has to be developed, and people participation for the management of animal conflict has to increase. Now what is happening over here is like people are putting electrical barbed wires around their field. So the conflict, rather than reducing the conflict, they are increasing the conflict. So the animals are not going to stop. Okay, whether you put the barriers or whether you put the electrical barbed wire, the electrical barbed wires are uh, doing more damage to the land and animals than to the field. So animals are forcefully now moving into the field because they know that there is a restriction. Okay, once you know that there is a restriction, they try to sort of break that restriction and go into the field and cross the road. So the animals are now moving forcefully into the field and doing more damages to these areas. So we have to think more ecological solution rather than going with this sort of a drastic sort of a electrical barbed wire or something like that. So we have to engage with the people, and then we have to talk with them. We have to, it's not like that it is not happening, obviously it is happening, as Girish and Raman are more involved in these activities of biodiversity and engaging with the people, but it has to come from the government, it has to come from the higher authorities. Okay, rather than NGOs or few pockets of NGOs are doing the work, it has to come from the government and central agencies. And then we come to zone 4 again, which has a maximum sort of a damage, where a lot of afforestation has been taken place and change of crop pattern has taken place. So the same guidelines for zone 4 as zone 3 is there. And then zone 5, where you people are going to study, which is Kudase Ambeliad Beach is a zone. So in this zone, forest cutting at the corridor areas of Indian Goa has been taken place, and the villages have flat land and a high density of bird and mammals. So it's important to control the deforestation on the in these areas, and people participation again in the forest protected area has to improve drastically. Then I've come with sort of a landscape management plan for Kudase. So where I have studied the entire Tillari, sort of one pocket of Tillari river and the forest around it. Okay, And what are the important things are there? So it is again a corridor, then changing crop pattern, conflict zone, and people participation, vagara, vagara. Then what sort of a landscape management plan we can give? So I have come up with sort of 3-4 ideas to develop this sort of a bird corridor along the river, because a lot of researchers and scientists come at this place, Tillari and Kudase. So the researchers from study of birds, researchers came to study the pattern of bats, researchers come to study gawa, researchers come to study tiger, researchers come to study elephant, little butterflies, dragonflies. So lot of researchers and photographers came to visit this place every year. So I have sort of given a sort of landscape management plan to develop this river corridor, which is this. So create a sort of a watchtowers for the researchers, and then sort of a tunnels on the roads from where the animals can pass through, and to develop a sort of a research center over there. So this is the first sort of example where we can develop a landscape corridor for the birds. So these are the few sketches that how we can develop a sort of a corridor for researchers and bird enthusiasts, and how we can create the pockets in between the jungle, and where they can stay, study, sit. Uh, then we can have a sort of a landscape. So this is our friend Praveen, who runs a sort of a homestay over there, which is a very small he has 2 cottages over there. So we are planning to have a sort of a bigger sort of a goal, to have a sort of a research center within the forest where a lot of researchers and are coming. So why can't we develop a sort of ecotourism model over there, where you can generate a sort of a economy for them also, and government can pay a subsidy for them for taking care of the forest around it, and have a research center with a library and few cottages within the jungle. And then this sort of a small sort of land corridors where you can have a sort of a road going from above, and then the animal can passes through this tunnel and goes to the river. So what is happening right now is the roads have been built already, and the animals are passing from the road. So why can't have a sort of ecological sort of a solutions where you have a road from above, and the animals can go from the tunnel without disturbing the road, and have the direct access to the river. So these sort of ecological sort of solutions which we have to talk about. So these are sort of a conflict zones over in the Tillari region, which I have studied on site, and I have given sort of a few sort of a management plan to them. Thank you. Should I stop sharing?
Yes, sir. So thank you, Onkar sir. So that was a very enriching presentation. I mean, you actually, sort of familiarized us with the geography, geology, physiography, flora, fauna, and also the challenges and pressures when nature and man comes into picture. So that was something which we have to truly understand and look into. So thank you so much for that. With this, the presentations are over. So we can now, open the platform to questions and answers. I request all the participants to please put your questions in the chat box. So in the meantime, I have also received a few questions. The first one is actually to Surya sir. Surya sir, you explained how the concepts are changing on broader platform related to cultural landscapes. When it comes to Indian cases, we are yet much behind in awareness among people. What you would like, what would you suggest, that we do to create that awareness?
Yeah, I think it is a very important fundamental question. I will just make it to the point. So the most important thing that is needed in all our work, especially in architecture, as just now we had seen the presentation also in the landscape sector, to understand, to document, and also to manage these sites and places and cultural landscapes and regions. We need to have holistic, multidisciplinary approach. We cannot set aside the subjects that we had learned in our social studies and history studies during our 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th standard. During those times, whatever we studied in economics, society, sociology, anthropology, soils, rocks, minerals, and resources of the land, the way we understand geography, it has to be multidisciplinary in our approach, and in our management too, we need to be multidisciplinary understanding. We need to do it with a multidisciplinary understanding. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for answering that question. I think you have put that quite rightly, that we need to look at it from a much broader perspective, a holistic perspective, than just looking at it from just one side maybe. The next question is to Onkar sir. How is the response of locals to government policies related to conflict areas? Do you think there is communication between government bodies and locals?
Yeah, when I have studied the area on ground, the response was sort of not that good, because the entire livelihood of these people are depending on the forests. Okay, you can't suddenly come up with, so it's very important to have sort of a conservation forest areas, but you have to provide a sort of a livelihood to those people also. You can't just say that animals and trees are very important, but people and their livelihood is not important. So you have to come up with sort of economical management plan with ecological management plan. You can't just ecological management plan or landscape management. You have to give them an economical management plan also. So the response of the people was sort of a 50-50%, that we agree that we need to have sort of a, and what is happening over here is like that they always say, when you go to Konkan or this sort of a remote areas, that they always said that you people from Pune and Bombay come to us and you teach us how to live ecologically and everything. And whereas you in Mumbai and Pune, you live in your AC, so-called AC RCC buildings, and you teach us how to live ecologically, especially. Why don't you live in, why don't you make Pune or Bombay ecological? It's a valid question, because there is a gap of economical gap is there. And people always want to sort of upgrade them or upgrade themselves. You can't expect people to live always in poverty. Okay, so that's a major question, that we also want to sort of increase our economy individually or in a household manner, but we want to protect our forests also. So how to deal with this sort of a conflict of economy and ecology? So they suggested, if government is willing to give us sort of a annual amount, or so for example, Gram Panchayat gets sort of a 50,000 or 1 lakh rupee to sort of manage the forest. Okay, then nobody is going to sell it, because they have that sort of a money to protect it. But if you're not going to give anything, but take away the land and whatever the livelihood they have from the forest, then they are going to oppose it.
Yes, thank you for answering the question for us, Onkar sir. Do we have any other questions from participant students? Okay, so I do not see any questions here, so I'm assuming that they have very well understood whatever sessions we have undertaken so far, and they have taken down notes and everything. So I think with this, we come to the end of today's presentations. So we will be continuing the sessions tomorrow, which is going to be our final third day of these 3-day series, which is held as a precursor to the settlement study. So I thank all the speakers, dignitaries, and participants, who have attended the session here today. I thank Architect Nyati Jikyasu ma'am, Poonam Tambaria ma'am for carving out time for the event, and you did the same thing for us the last time as well. And I thank Architect Suryanarayana Murthy sir and Architect Onkar Khebutkar sir for their insightful presentations for today. I am sure this has added more, sort of understanding into the minds of students, into what they have to really, do, and when they go to site. So I'm sure they are prepped now. Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everybody. We will see you tomorrow.